All right, well, it's 8 o'clock and we'll get going today. So thank you all for coming to Medical Grand Rounds. Today's a special Grand Rounds. It's the first of our Dream speaker series. We've changed it up a little bit this year and asked each residency class to select a speaker, a special guest for Medical Grand Rounds. And I am delighted today to introduce Dr. Dana Lay, who will introduce our Medical Grand Round speaker.
Thank you, Dr. Schnapp. As Dr. Schnapp mentioned, my name is Dana Lay. I'm a PGY3 internal medicine resident here at UW and one of the PGY3 representatives on the Department of Medicine Grand Rounds Committee. And I will be starting my GI fellowship here at UW next year. It's my pleasure today to introduce our Grand Round speaker, Dr. Amy Oxentenko. She was selected by our class to present today as part of our Dream Speaker Series. Personally, as a medicine resident going into gastroenterology, I've been familiar with Dr. Oxentenko's work and the great impact she's had on the field and on medical education, especially for women. She is an outstanding role model and leader in academic gastroenterology. Dr. Oxentenko received her medical degree at the University of North Dakota School of Medicine. She completed her residency, chief residency, and fellowship training at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, and she is currently a professor of medicine at the Mayo Clinic College of Medicine. She has previously served as the Gastroenterology and Hepatology Fellowship Program Director at the Mayo Clinic, and more recently as the Internal Medicine Residency Program Director at the Mayo Clinic from 2013 to 2020. In July 2020, she became the chair of the Department of Medicine at the Mayo Clinic in Arizona. She has been heavily involved in the American College of Gastroenterology as a member of their executive team. She is currently the secretary and will be president of the ACG in 2024. Additionally, she is a senior associate editor of the American Journal of Gastroenterology. Dr. Oxentenko's academic interests include education, curriculum development, career advancement, and mentorship. She was co-developer and co-director of the Train the Trainers program at the American College of Gastroenterology, and she served as the chair of their Women in Gastroenterology Committee. She recently co-created and directed a Bridging the Leadership Gap course there, which addressed career advancement and leadership skills for women in the field. She has published work addressing representation of women and gender disparities in both internal medicine and gastroenterology, and she's been a mentor for numerous medical students, residents, and fellows at every stage of her career. She has won countless teaching awards over the years, including numerous Mayo Clinic Department of Medicine Residency Top Educator Awards, their School of Graduate Medical Education Program Director of the Year Award, and their Distinguished Educator Award. Last year, she was selected as the Helio GI Woman Disruptive Innovator of the Year for her leadership and positive impact on the specialty, as well as the outstanding example she has set for younger female physicians in the specialty. Dr. Oxentenko has a prominent social media presence on Twitter, where she has nearly 12,000 followers. And today she will be presenting her talk entitled Social Media Engagement, Tips, Tricks, and Trolls. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Amy Oxentenko to the Department of Medicine Grand Rounds today. Thank you, Dr. Oxentenko.
Thank you so much, Dana, for that incredible introduction. And I still remember the day that you interviewed at Mayo Clinic, and I was the residency program director. So program director never forgets an applicant. So I also want to thank, the chief residents and the third year class for inviting me to be the Dream Speaker Series. It's an incredible honor. So let's go ahead and get started. So as you could see from my title, we're going to talk about social media engagement, tips, tricks, and trolls. And I'm really going to walk you through my experience with social media and what it's really done in terms of the training program that I ran, as well as my career. So you can see the objectives here. I really want you to see some of the benefits social media could have for whether it's recruitment, your career, branding, give you some ways to stay most up to date in medicine using social media, and then really some effective things to allow you to make your profile or postings more effective. And then I think it's really important that we spend some time talking about the pitfalls and fears of using social media and ways that you can mitigate them. So I'm just going to start with telling about the history of our recruitment to our residency program when I was a program director in Rochester, because that's really started me on this social media journey. So when I stepped into that role in 2013, I was the first woman program director for that program. And for many years, we had struggled to recruit a diverse workforce into our residency program. And knowing that the average percent of women graduating from internal medicine was between 42 and 44% per year, our program, would sometimes average in the mid 30% range in terms of the recruitment of women. And I mistakenly stepped into the role thinking, well, maybe as the first woman in this role, it would be much easier to recruit women just by seeing a female role model in that space. And I remember being several years into the role and then having a year, several years into it, where our recruitment just shocked me that despite all of the things we were doing, we recruited a class that was 25% women and only 4% underrepresented in medicine. And it made me realize I needed to take a totally different approach to our recruitment in order to meet the goals that I personally had for our program and for the recruitment of women and those underrepresented in medicine. So I really began to research what I needed to do to be more effective in this space. So one of the things that I first did is I'm part of a group called PROUD, Promoting and Respecting Our Women Doctors, which is run by Dr. Julie Silver, a great friend and collaborator with mine. And we started a series of annual retreats a little more than 3 years ago. And at our first ever retreat, we went around as a group and had an ask of the other participants of PROUD. And my ask was, I shared I shared our recruitment struggles, and I said, what is it that I need to do? I knew all of the other things in terms of just revamping our recruitment, but I said, what other things could I do that would be really helpful? And everyone responded that I needed to get involved with social media. And you can see on the right, this was my reaction. I think many of us have our email inbox that is full. We have our Epic in basket that's overflowing. And so to the thought of getting involved in something else that I needed to manage really made me cringe. People talked about me getting involved in Twitter. And I had once done a Twitter chat for Mayo back in 2013. I had 50 followers and I really signed on for that chat and never embarked on Twitter again. But this group really encouraged me to embrace it. They taught me some of the tips and tricks to get me started. And we'll walk you through that history. So the first thing they said is you really need to go into Twitter or social media defining your goal. And for me, it was recruitment. That's what my focus goal was when I started in terms of social media. And so I think if that's the case, you have to define what you're looking to do. And for me, it was really helping to target recruitment. And if you're looking at recruitment strategies, are you looking to diversify your program? Are you looking to recruit more broadly across the country? Maybe you're recruiting for a staff position and you're looking for an expert in the field. All of these can be things that help define, your presence or what you're going to do in that space. And for me, it was really helping to diversify our program in any way you can define diversity. So obviously there's the clear obvious ways to reach out to applicants at meetings through SNMA, ACP, AMWA, others. These are the obvious and things that we have been doing, but obviously in and of themselves were not solely effective. So that's why this group said to me, well, where else do you find applicants? Applicants are on social media. They're a young group that's actively involved in social media. This is where you need to meet them in this space to show them what you're doing in your program. You're doing a lot of innovative things, but they're not aware of them because you're not showing them in the space that they're living, many hours of their life for some of them. So again, that's what helped convince me. When you look at the uptake on social media in recent years, it really, I think looking at the data behind that really helped convince me that this was probably something that I at least needed to try, and if it wasn't successful, then I could back off. I think when you look at who uses social media, you can see that the biggest group that uses social media are those between 18 and 49 years of age, which encompasses the far majority of applicants applying to a residency program. Not all, there's some that might be outliers above that, but again, this would incorporate many of them. So again, more compelling data to make me think, okay, this is something that I should at least consider in terms of an avenue for recruitment strategies. So the next step was really to pick your platform. There's lots of social media platforms. And I will say I have an account in all of these, Facebook to socialize with family and friends and update family pictures. Instagram solely so I can spy on what my children are doing. Twitter, we'll talk about. LinkedIn, again, I haven't really dabbled a whole lot in this, but this is a good one for professional recruitment. And then Doximity, because our institution has set that up, and that's really the way to go through U.S. News and World Report voting. So I really chose Twitter for the reasons that I could see that applicants and residency programs were avidly using Twitter, and I felt like that's the avenue that I needed to pick for this specific goal. So then you need to think about your audience to help focus your branding. So I was very strategic when I got started. You know, some people start on social media and follow anyone and everyone. I was very strategic because I wanted my feed to be filled with things that were very, very helpful for me, given I knew that I would be on a time restraint in order to keep that focus and not get distracted. So I initially was very strategic in following those that were aligned with my mission. Again, my mission was for recruiting a diverse workforce. So I followed, you know, various med school groups and med school institutions. I was very strategic and very cautious not to follow individual medical students that could be applying to internal medicine in the next year or two. And I did that strategically because I really did not want there to be a perceived conflict of interest if I liked one of their posts, didn't like it. So I was very mindful of that, and I didn't want to put any individual in an awkward situation. I also figured out, you know, what were the, you know, groups in terms of, you know, the societies, not only that had diverse workforces, but were, you know, doing strategic things in that space. And then by following a few people, again, some of them were members of this Proud group who are influencers, and seeing, well, who are the people that were following them and they were following, really helped me build out who are some of the top influencers in the space of equity, inclusion, and diversity that I could then follow and then see what they were doing and take some of their ideas and implement them in our program. So that's really how I first got started. Now, just a few basics, and again, I know we have an audience that probably spans from very avid social media users to those of you who were probably like me a few years ago and you know, hesitant, maybe don't even have a profile, or maybe you've started one and you're not sure what to do with it. So some of these are just some basic things that I just want to make sure we onboard. So when I'm going to speak about the word handle, what handle means is this little @ symbol. And if you're searching in Twitter and you put an @ symbol with any name, that helps you find user accounts. So for example, the @ symbol Mayo Clinic will bring you to Mayo Clinic's Twitter profile page. Whereas a hashtag, which is the # symbol, really helps you identify subject matter. So again, if you put in the search bar, let's say diversity in GI or any sort of topic, again, without any spaces, that will allow you to find any tweets in reverse chronologic order that included that as a hashtag. And that's why you see people including various hashtags in posts in order for anyone else to go in and follow, you know, that hashtag and see what's being posted in that space. So those can be used very strategic in ways that I'll talk about. So again, when I got started, I figured out, okay, well, looking first of all for women in medicine, and again, these lists are by no means all inclusive, but I looked to see what are social media accounts that are largely, the followers of that group are women in medicine. So I started to develop that list and again, follow those groups. I did the same for those that were involved in diversity and inclusion, looked at those handles, but then also looked at hashtags, some of them which were becoming very popular, to decide, well, you know, what groups are following in this space, what are the things I see posted. So it really did allow some time to kind of learn what was going on in these spaces, learn what was effective, see what other people were tweeting about, and see what sort of posts caught my attention, again, in order to be very strategic before we launched. So as our program then did lots of various things in our recruitment strategies, we were also very strategic in our social media launch from our residency account. And not only did we set up a residency account where the chief residents and myself all had administrative access, I also had in parallel my own social media account where I did some similar things that we would tweet across, but I would also do things in my own space because again, I wanted to also be very mindful that the things that we were posting on our program site weren't all related to women in medicine because again, we wanted to be inclusive of anyone coming into our program. So we had strategic posts on social events that were going on in our training program, would put pictures again of people involved in those events. And again, because it was only the chief residents and I, we had a very mindful eye to look at every picture. If people were out at social events, were pagers off, were name tags off, we had to have a very discerning eye for these sorts of things. Every Sunday, we did a post highlighting one of our trainees with hashtag Scholarly Sunday. Again, mindful to rotate, between men and women, their academic achievements. We highlighted travel, scholarly travel our trainees were able to do. This is really helpful to show, pre-COVID warm and balmy places that trainees could present their research, which was helpful, especially this time of the year. Many trainees and applicants were interested in volunteerism experiences, so we made sure to highlight those on a regular basis. And then obviously when it comes to match season, also being, excited about sharing our trainees' own posts on social media and their excitement about matching. The other thing that was really helpful, and one thing I did when I stepped into this role over the first few years, is one thing that I had been given as really strong advice is you want your recruitment team to represent and be reflective of the group you're looking to recruit. And so I changed over our entire recruitment team. And of course, I use this as a way to just showing a tweet showing my recruitment team. And it was just something that looked like this. It was just our picture saying, welcome to the internal medicine residency recruitment team. I really didn't have to say anything else because I think a picture is worth 1,000 words, and people can look at this picture and see, wow, diversity matters to this group. They obviously have, diversity representation within their interviewing committee. I didn't need to put, that 53% were women and almost a quarter were underrepresented in medicine. Again, I think you don't need to always use those words. I think pictures and graphics and visuals can be very helpful to show applicants what's important to you. I think the other thing that we did is we had heard feedback from some of our applicants that they just weren't sure how open Mayo Clinic was in terms of, embracing those in the LGBT community. And part of that is, Mayo has this formality about suits and it's a smaller community. And so again, we, based on some of the input of some of our current residents, did a few very subtle things. In all of our recruitment offices, we had, posted the safe zone sign behind each of us so our applicants could see it when they were meeting with us. We did things on Pride Month, having our chief residents make posts, again, making sure that everyone who would be considering our program felt welcome and that they would be embraced. The other thing that we did is based again on Dr. Julie Silver's work and some of her initiatives that she does with her Harvard Leadership course. She had an initiative that year on the hashtag Walls Do Talk, really saying that as applicants or anyone is in an institution, they should be able to walk the hallways and see representation of the artwork where they felt included and welcome in that institution. History is, so remarkable, and many of our hallways are filled with historical references of prior leaders, which is great. And it's not to say there's not a role for these pictures and this recognition, because there is. But if this is a space where your junior faculty and trainees are walking through and they don't see anyone that looks like them, they may not feel very included in that space. So we were mindful of this as well. This was actually a picture that was on our website. And I use this as an example. This was one of our resident workspaces. And I can tell you, back when we did in-person interviews, Mayo had done the art and decor for that room, which included pictures of Dr. Henry Plummer and the Mayo brothers, black and white pictures around the room of some of the early Mayo founders. And we had more applicants ask about who are these individuals on the wall. And it really drew our attention that, boy, this may not feel very inclusive, even though this is history. So our chief residents and some of our residents on their own created this colorful artwork, including, colorful pictures of cortisone and thyroxine, things that still have Mayo historic value. And we replaced the artwork in these work areas with these sorts of things. And again, made sure to post on that to show everybody that inclusivity was really important to us. We also used our website. So in this case, we had, profiles of our trainees. So for example, here's Dr. Say Jang. She would have a profile that you could click on. And we were strategic, again, using our website and social media to ask questions that kind of debunked any myths that people would have about our program. So we specifically had her address some of the ways that she saw women being supported in our program. And again, I think you can do things like this to think about what might be things that might be barriers for someone coming to your program. What are those myths? And without calling them out as myths, how can you debunk those through social media and postings very effectively? So just to kind of end this part of the presentation, how did that work for us? And obviously it worked incredibly well. That first year, when we did all of these strategic things with not only things with social media, but really an overview of our recruitment strategies, but definitely including these social media strategies that I mentioned. That first year, we recruited 58% women, which is a marked increase from the 25% the year before. And we had over 20% of those underrepresented in medicine. Again, a big change from the 4 to 6% the year before. Now, some people said, well, that's great, but is that just a one-year glitch or aberrancy, and is that a sustainable sort of thing? But I can tell you for the last 3 years and beyond now, we have maintained a recruitment of women over 50% and those underrepresented in medicine greater than 15% for more than 3 years in a row now. So I think this has shown a sustainable effort, which is really probably one of the most rewarding things that I felt I could leave into that training program. The other thing, and I want to circle back to the LGBT impact that we had as well. Again, with some of those initiatives that we had, we started to really build an incredible LGBT community within our training program to the point where we developed this, and it was, again, a resident-driven effort in terms of this allies within our residency program. And this became such a big area of support that other trainees from other programs at Mayo wanted to join, and this soon became a GME-wide initiative at our institution that gained significant recognition, which is really great to see. Again, it's very small things that have great impact to show people in these ways how they're going to be included in your training program. Now, I include this slide for a specific reason, and again, we'll get to some of the things later on that are really important, but I think as a training director, a chief resident, anyone who has access or administrative access to these accounts that might be posting, I would just argue that it's really important to ensure your trainees are okay with you posting anything that identifies them. Whether it's at a social event where they may have a cocktail in their hand, again, off hours, where it might be something like this, that they may have some reservations about this going on social media. They might be comfortable within your own training program sharing various things, but they may not be comfortable with things being on social media. So I have always asked all of my trainees before I post something of them on social media if I have their permission to do so. Also, no, I've written in the world of social media and some of our successes. And so similarly, if I'm going to post anything or publish anything that has a picture of a post that includes trainees, really now it's essential that you get written permission from anyone in that photo to post their picture, even if it was in a social media profile. So I think those are just some important caveats to think about. And again, we'll talk about how that needs to align with your own institutional social media policies. So let's say you're not involved with recruitment. You might say, well, why does social media matter to me? Why will it matter to me? Well, here's lots of other spaces again, and this is not meant to be all inclusive of things that you could build out your branding on social media. For junior faculty and trainees, a great way to highlight your accomplishments. And if you're not one that's comfortable highlighting your own accomplishments, which many people are not, find an accomplishment buddy, someone who can post some things on your behalf to really elevate and give you the recognition for the great work you're doing. Same with publications. I'll show you some evidence how this is just an amazing vehicle to disseminate your scholarly work, branding in whatever area you're looking to brand. And then we'll talk about how, just as a source of CME, this is an incredible reservoir of information. So now we're going to take a step back for those of you who have really not embarked on social media, and I'm going to just give you some basics of creating a profile that will be probably, more effective than others. So this is an example of a Twitter profile. This is my Twitter profile page. So just a few things as you're setting up, let's say for the first time, a profile, or let's say you have one, you might think about, maybe I need to update some of these things on my profile. So obviously you can enter your name and your degree, and I would recommend putting your full name and your degree in terms of when you open your account. Then you can choose your handle, and I would strongly recommend you choosing your handle. If Twitter does it, I'll show you what you get. It's a jumble of letters and numbers that no one will ever remember. You definitely want your handle to be something that people will remember so they can easily tag you later on. I was always advised to use your first and last name in entirety if it fits. It is character limited, and to also put your degree. If you have a degree that some people may not recognize outside of medicine, like let's say MBBS, etc., then you might have your handle be, let's say, Dr. Amy Oxentenko in that setting. You get this very brief character limited kind of bio that you can put. So again, be very strategic of what you put there, be mindful of space, abbreviation. You can, and this is helpful because people will look at your profile to decide, is this someone I want to follow? Do they have interests that are in common to me? What do they actually do? You can put a headshot, and I would recommend using, a decent headshot, ideally a professional one, and fill the space as much as you can so that people can recognize you. I think it's also important, this defaults to a light blue kind of area that's blank on Twitter, but you can put a picture there. So I change up this picture regularly. This is a great way to showcase branding of what you're looking to achieve by your social media use. And then I typically, you see on a lot of posts that retweets are mine, just showing that this profile page is mine. I'm not really representing my institution in my own personal Twitter profile. So now I'm just going to show you a few others. Again, this is, like I mentioned, my good friend and colleague, Dr. Julie Silver, lots of the same elements that I commented, her handle, her brief bio sketch. She has a great picture of Boston here where she lives as her background. Here's another colleague, a phenomenal he for she individual, Dr. Michael Sinna, and you can see, he uses very bold branding in this background space, on his social media profile. So again, you can use that however you want, but it shows how just a profile can make a big difference in who follows you. Here's an example. I was at a conference once and this name came up and I thought, ooh, I want to follow this person who's Crystal Caldwell. So I put it in Twitter. There was probably, 15 Crystal Caldwells. And you can see from these two different profiles of that someone with the same name, again, blue background. This is the unused real estate where there's no branding. In both of these cases, one has no picture, one has an emoji over their face. You can't see who they are. So I wouldn't even be sure, well, is this the Crystal Caldwell that I met? I can't tell. So I'm not eager to follow either of these people. You can see that their handles are ones that Twitter picked for them, which is part of their first name with a series of numbers. No one will ever remember and identify that with you. And you can see they have very low uptake. So, this is just where you really need to be mindful of creating your profile if you want it to be effective. So now when we get into the basics of anatomy of a tweet, and again, this is kind of Twitter 101, how you can make your tweets better. And I'll show you why this can be really important. So, all of the text that you can fit here in this Twitter box is character limited, and this has been increased over recent years, 280, including all spaces. So you can use abbreviations. It's okay. You don't need to be grammatically correct in full sentences. But you will find that tweets are more appeasing to the eye if you use a picture, if you use a GIF. You can actually do polls within Twitter, which is cool. I think it's also helpful, instead of having just a end block text of words, to use bullets, symbols, or emojis as bullets, which is quite creative to do as well. Again, if you're going to put out a tweet and there's a commonly used hashtag, to include that, because if you think, oh, this is a post that I'm doing about diversity and inclusion, well, then put a hashtag diversity and inclusion, because anyone searching for Twitter for that concept will then find your tweet. Tag others that are, that you think would be useful to tag in your post. Again, I give caution in this regard, not to just, randomly tag people just because they have a huge follower list and you're hoping to just embark and grab some of those followers. Really tag people that this is their interest as well, because by tagging them, this will go in their notifications and feeds. So you really want it to represent what they would want to be tagged in. You can add links to articles, which is great, and I'll talk about how that's effective. I would say that if you put the traditional link for an article, it's going to take up half of your character limit. So there's things like tinyurl or bit.ly, which are the smaller, more abbreviated link for an article, which you should use. It uses up much fewer characters. One thing that people don't like about Twitter, myself included, is that there's no ability to edit once it's posted, unlike Facebook, which you can edit. The only way to edit a tweet is to totally take it down and edit it and then retweet it. The issue is if it's already been retweeted, there's no way to go back and grab that. So I would carefully preview anything that you're going to send out before you send it. The other thing I like about Twitter is there's this ability to draft. So let's say you get a tweet all ready to go and you don't have time to proofread it. Maybe you want to spend more time making it look more visually attractive. You can cancel out of it. When you cancel, we'll ask if you want to delete that tweet or save it as a draft. So if you save it as a draft, it will put this in this draft folder here, which you can later come back and launch it at specific times. I'll use draft tweets before I go to a meeting or at a meeting. I'll look at lectures that are coming up. I'll create very kind of eye-catching tweets about a talk that's coming up. I'll put it in my draft tweet so that when that talk launches, I will then launch these tweets so that I can not only pay attention to the talk, but I have live tweeting going on as well. So again, here's an example of a tweet. I did this last year just to show how this all can be put into one tweet. So again, you can see the picture, my username, my handle. You can see here that I've added some handles of Julie Silver and Harvard Med, because this was part of the Her Time Is Now campaign, and I knew that they were instrumental to that. I added that Her Time Is Now hashtag, so anyone following that initiative could follow. I put here a bit.ly link to the white paper, as well as the website. So again, very small characters that were required. You can add a photo here, and I tend to, sometimes I'll add a regular photo, sometimes I use an app called Canva, which allows you, and there's others as well, that allows you to make almost a photo collage that you can make almost like a visual abstract, which is really helpful. You can put more in a picture. And then down below, for those of you who haven't used Twitter, people can, comment on your tweet, retweet your tweet, like your tweet, or share your tweet either to an email, a text message, anyone else from that standpoint. And then down here, you can see statistics on how far reaching was any tweet that you had. So those are just kind of some of the basics. So now I'm just going to show you a few examples of how you could change a tweet to make it more visually attractive. So I was out hiking with my family one day, quickly kind of put some thoughts into words. I won't even ask you to read this, but I took this, I'm like, this is the most boring, visually boring tweet. It's just text. People don't like that. So what I did is I took that same content, and you can see I bulleted it, same content, but you can see just more visually attractive, added a few hashtags, added a picture at the top of our hike up in Flagstaff, Arizona. And then behind the photos, which is a great thing to know, you can actually tag 10 accounts in any photo. You can't do that behind a GIF, but you can do it behind a photo. So I could tag 10 other accounts behind this photo, which means that it's going to reach 10 other accounts, which then disseminates the work even further. So that's very helpful when you think about photos. And why is it helpful to add a photo? Well, I think studies will show that if you have a tweet with an image, you will receive, you can see more click-throughs, more likes, more retweets. So I think it's helpful in terms of disseminating whatever message is up here, put a visual picture that might support that. And then again, your reach is going to be far greater, not only because of the picture, but also because you have the ability to tag more accounts as well. And these tagged accounts do not take up any of that character space. So some of you might be thinking, okay, I'm getting involved in social media. First, when you get started, you might just like things. You might not tweet anything of your own because that seems a little bit scary. Then you kind of feel a little more comfortable on this taxonomy of, retweeting someone else's content. Then you can retweet their content and add your own editorial on that. And then, at some point you might get comfortable creating your own tweets and disseminating that as well. So it's not as though you have to start here and slowly work your way up, but this is kind of the comfort level in terms of, how you might get involved with Twitter, and do it very slowly like I did. So now I'm going to tell you and talk about some of the power of social media, because I think this is really can be quite incredible. So, you can use social media to disseminate your expertise. So, you might tweet key points from key studies, again, adding the link so people can get right into that article, assuming it has access from that standpoint. This might be your key studies. That might be your, collaborative, social media partner that you're retweeting their content for them, or just, key studies that are coming out in your field. I already mentioned doing tweets from meetings, and then following experts in the field and commenting on their work. That's a way for those experts to then think about, oh, who is this person that's commenting on my work? I'm going to follow them. And then when other people see that this expert is following you, it then can lead to increased uptake in terms of that. So I'm going to give you an example, and I'll come back to this as well. This was a paper that I put together with Dr. Mohammed Bilal, a good friend and mentee of mine who's now a colleague of mine in GI. So we wrote a paper in the last year on, you can see here, the impact of Twitter, why you should get involved, and tips and tricks to get started. So the day that this came out in press, I did a tweet on this, tagging my my collaborator. We put the link to this paper. I put, again, this kind of visually attractive with the bullet points of our paper. I did kind of a visual abstract with some key pictures from that paper. And so we'll talk about, once I made this tweet and we tweeted that out, about a week later, we had a strategy that then my collaborator here, Dr. Mohammed Bilal, then sent out this same tweet in a tweetorial, a series of tweets kind of going into detail about what our paper showed. And I'll come back to the impact that that had. So I just want to take a sidetrack here on talking about altmetric attention scores. So with altmetric attention score is this kind of circular donut that includes a number and this colorful swirl of activity around it. And this score in this donut helps you identify how much and the type of attention any research output receives. The number included inside here is really, based on the volume of mentions, and you can't have one person mentioning something 431 times. You only get one mention per person. It also has some impact based on where the source was. Was it a news media source? Was it, the reliability of that source? And then the authors of that mention, again, kind of their expertise within an area. And the score represents a weighted approximation of all of that. But what's really important is it's not a measure of the quality of research or researcher. So if this number is super high in the thousands, that doesn't mean it's the best paper out there. It just means that it had a lot of attention through various sources. So that's, I think, an important concept to keep in mind that I'll come back to. So when you see, let's say, this altmetric attention score, this number and this color swirl pattern, the color swirl pattern all relates to, the attention and where it has come. So you can see this is a very, rainbow-like where it has attention from all sources. But you can see if this was someone's altmetric swirl, you can see that most of this is red coming from mainstream news. You can see this one has largely been from blogs and, other sources. And you can see one that is largely blue has come from Twitter as well as other post-review publications. So just keep that in mind. So with the Twitter paper I just talked about, with my colleague and I put out, within less than a week of our post, our score was what it was. You can see it was very blue because it was largely being disseminated on Twitter for a Twitter paper. And you could quickly see on our tweet how widespread our tweet was already reaching all across the world within a week. And within a week, because of that strategy that we had of me disseminating that and then him doing a tweetorial on that, within a week, our score, our altmetric score, was at the 99th percentile compared to any other paper that was published on that same day that came out in press. And again, this was a paper that was just really an opinion piece of how to use social media. There was no p-value in it. So this was comparing against other papers that came out at that same time, that were top-notch science. So it just shows how a strategic social media dissemination strategy can really get your paper and your publication or your trainee, your mentee's paper, the attention that you hope it will deserve. And so again, within a week of our tweet activity, you can see that when we looked at the statistics, almost 40,000 people saw that tweet on social media, which led then to them going into this article, reading the article, which then drives the altmetric attention score. And the score isn't so much important as more people reading it and, talking about your works. So now this brings me to another strategy, and again, showing how another example of how this dissemination is so useful. So this is kind of a tale of a forgotten paper. This was a paper that I wrote and published back in 2017 with one of our prior internal medicine chief residents at Mayo, Dr. Krause, on the impact of pregnancy and gender in residency evaluations. So when this was published, it really didn't get a whole lot of attention in JGIM. You can see it had a score, for what it's worth, of 177. There's a rank that journal has of, within that journal, how high ranking was that paper in the things that it did that year, and then how many times that article had been shared. So again, I know these metrics are probably a bit meaningless, but I'll show you that they were baseline data that we recorded on this paper. Then what we decided to do is Dr. Julie Silver had this idea to do a journal club on Physician Weekly, which is a weekly chat on Twitter. And what she decided to do is take 8 papers that were all related to, kind of promotion of women in medicine and diversity efforts in medicine, and chose 8 papers along that line. And really, we're going to have a journal club online through a single Physician Weekly chat about those 8 papers. So what we did is we had these 8 papers, and these are just abbreviations for the content of those papers. And at time 0, the day we sent out a tweet saying, we are going to have a journal club in approximately 3 weeks for an hour-long Physician Weekly chat. These will be the 8 papers that we will discuss, and we had links to all of them. And you can see here the altmetric score for all of those papers at baseline. And just by announcing on social media that in 3 weeks we were going to have a journal club on those topics. You can see the Altmetric attention scores increased on all of them. And then the day of the 1 hour, single 1 hour physician weekly chat, you can see the Altmetric score took an additional bump and then pretty much plateaued for all but one paper, which continued to climb. So the pregnancy paper that I was part of, again, you can see just in this short time period, the attention score went from 177 up to almost 300. The rank in the journal, which you would want to fall, meaning it becomes higher ranked within that journal, and you can see had almost a doubling of the shares. And we took this strategy that we did on social media with this one single chat, and we published it in Journal of Women's Health, showing how to disseminate research. So that's not the end of the story. Again, this is part of that same Journal of Women's Health study. This showed the Altmetric rank for each of those 8 papers on the day of the chat announcement, and then, you know, after 1 month after the chat, and you can see the rank improve for every single one of those papers, other than this one, which was already very highly ranked to begin with. Well, then what happened is we had people on social media, great social media disseminators, who then saw this work of this paper and then further disseminated that paper, including the article on this, you know, study, but then also including all of the links to these studies, which further disseminated this paper. So then what we did is we, you know, there was a tweet that went out with this visual abstract, having that original paper of mine, showing that a year after the study was published and before the social media strategy even started, again, low number of shares, you know, about 400 downloads, very low cited paper. You can see a week after the social media strategy, again, you know, over almost a 10-fold increase in shares, downloads, really no change in citations. And then a year after this strategy, again, you can see, you know, huge number increase in shares, downloads, and citations. And then again, what went at that time is this paper 2 years later of how we did that strategy. And again, once we disseminated this visual abstract in tweets, you can see from then until now, you can see the number of shares and downloads increase further, and the number of citations now went from 2 to 6 to 27. So I think that just shows the power of social media to that forgotten paper. And, you know, you may have some people that say, well, this is a lot of work. Is it worth it? And I think what's helpful to know is that institutions are starting to take social media into academic promotion considerations. Here's a paper that came out in JGME 3 years ago. One of the authors was Dr. Spinner, who is the chair of our academic promotions committee at Mayo Clinic, along with other authors. And this paper really talks about key points, best practice recommendations, an impact grid for how to score social media scholarship in academic promotion, and then end with a consensus statement. So I think this is really helpful, and other institutions are starting to do the same. So the next step is really, you know, the keys to staying up to date. So, you know, as general internists in the audience or as subspecialists, this is just a wealth of information on Twitter. This is where honestly I get most of my CME updates right now, compared to any, you know, waiting for the journal to come in the mail, etc. So I'm going to show you a few that I think are really fun and popular. Here's an account, Journal of Hospital Medicine. They have a Choosing Wisely campaign, and they have a series that they call The Things We Do for No Reason, and that has its own handle with the abbreviations. Great visual abstracts on, you know, cost-effective ways to practice medicine. Really helpful, key things that you can use for teaching rounds, giving lectures, really useful. The Curbsiders are another great source of updated information and podcasts. So they will tweet out when they have a new podcast that comes up, again, a visual abstract highlighting key references within internal medicine, which is fantastic. Core IM, again, another one. They have their own podcast. They come out and tweet out pearls, mind the gaps, hoofbeats, which are just, you know, categorizations of different initiatives they have really to disseminate internal medicine knowledge. Very high yield, probably more high yield than any of the other sort of CME things that we're doing. For those of you who, you know, want to have dissemination of other things, there are great leadership podcasts that, again, I find out about them when they first go live through Twitter. I follow all of these podcast groups on social media. They all have a presence on Twitter. I know cutting edge when their podcasts come out, so I can be one of the first to listen to it and then help them disseminate that information if it's useful in things that I'm doing. For me as a gastroenterologist, after I started to really have developed the space within, you know, the recruitment, then I started to branch out, and obviously I followed all of my GI societies. I followed the journals that my GI societies also affiliated with. So what that allowed is every week I might get a video of the week like this that comes out from, American College of Gastroenterology that I can watch a live video. Again, great CME. Podcasts right as they come out live, I'm able to see them and listen to them if I'm interested. Again, there might be neuromuscular meetings that I just can't go to in GI because of just the sake of travel. So if I want to follow a hashtag, I can really see, someone who's live tweeting from that meeting and get all the key summaries from a meeting from the comfort of my home. And then similarly, I see something hot off the press from a journal months before it's going to come out in paper version. And again, it allows me to disseminate the latest literature. This is a great way to meet other people in the field or through chats or journal clubs. Again, and this list is by no means all inclusive, but these were some of them that I initially participated in: Physician Weekly Chat, Women in Medicine Chat, MedEd Chat. There's a great NEFJC journal club and podcast that has done great innovative work, and so many more. So these are a great way to find out who are some of the influencers in these spaces. All right, so let's just run through the pitfalls, because I think this is really important in our final bit of time here. So again, everyone has different prerogatives of why they go into social media. For me, I've taken the stance, I just avoid any topics that I think will be controversial. Not that I want to avoid controversy, but what I want to do is avoid trolls, the people that are going to come into my profile and be naysayers. So as we went through the election, I really did not post anything really about the election until after it was over. And even then I posted things about Amanda Gorman giving her amazing poem and things like that. But I wanted to keep my brand, my social media profile free of controversy, because I just saw people get into really uncomfortable situations that, again, I didn't go into social media to, make this be something that I really had to manage from a controversy standpoint. What you'll find is if you do, and if you decide to go into that space, you're going to attract trolls. And trolls are these people who are on social media largely to stir up controversy. And they're almost, I liken them to a parasite. If you engage with a troll, it just feeds that parasite, and they will just continue to bring you down on social media. So if I've ever had a troll that has said something negative about one of my posts, I just don't respond at all, because then that just continues to lead to them, further engaging with you. You can decide to block those individuals. But again, I think avoiding really strong controversy allows you to avoid the trolls. I think this is an absolute crucial one to be mindful of is Hipaa. So I've seen so many people get into trouble because they have posted things that have patient identifiers. They have a computer screen in the background which has patient information. They have a patient, outside a patient's room where you can see the name on the patient. They put an X-ray up that has a patient identifier. Again, all of these things will absolutely get you into trouble on social media. So for me, I never post anything about patients whatsoever on my social media profile, because again, that's just an area that I stay away from. So these are a few things people, fear. They're fearful that they're not able to edit on social media, or at least on Twitter. They're fearful that they'll say something that will get them into trouble, and they fear that it will be a time suck. And remember, all of these are under your control. So again, be mindful about what you tweet. Don't say something that will get you into trouble. That's where I think having, keeping your frontal lobe intact of, is this something that I want to put out there? And then again, you can walk away from I can walk away from Twitter from several weeks before coming back to it without any consequence. So I would say do not use social media when you're upset, when you're drinking, when you're exhausted, when you're rushed, when you're in any patient care area. And I would also say when you're not fully informed of a situation. I've sometimes seen trainees put something out there that's a little bit uninformed, and it gets them in trouble. So again, I would say read your social media policy for your institution. And I'm going to leave this up only for a second because you can go back in the recording. Lots of links that University of Wisconsin-Madison Public Health and the social media policies and guidelines, all here for your references. So if you have a social media profile and you haven't stepped into these, you need to. Just a few quick things. There is a lot of bullying that goes on in social media, and we've seen more of this recently as people are in patient advocacy and public advocacy efforts. Dr. Aurora posted that really 1 in 6 women experience sexual harassment if they are, posting on certain things on, social media, especially in relation to advocacy work. So this is a real area this is really unfortunate. It's unfortunate people have come into this space to attack others. But luckily, we have a group called Impact for Healthcare that has put out harassment toolkits, ways to avoid it, ways to mitigate it if you see it happening. So again, I'll just leave this up for your reference later. The last thing I want to talk about doxing, and again, I know we're running short on time, so I'm going to rush through this, but one question I have trainees ask is, should they remain anonymous? I see a lot of trainees using a pseudonym, not a picture, and posting. And then what's been happening lately is this thing called doxing. And what doxing is when people try to publicly identify you, even though you have tried to be anonymous within social media. And there are ways that these people go out of their way to identify the people who have chosen to be unidentified, which is really unfortunate, but it's really not that hard to do. And, there's sites now that show you, it's not that hard to figure out who you are, and you can actually go in and dox yourself and sort out and figure out how fast can it take for someone with the information that you have posted to be able to identify where you're from, what training program that you're on. So I would say if you're trying to be anonymous, there are people who will be able to figure out who you are. So what's my opinion on anonymity? Again, this is just my opinion. I would say it's probably better and safer to use your identity because people may be able to figure out who you are. I think that way it probably keeps you in check to say, if you were going to stay anonymous because you were worried about what people were going to think of what you're posting, well, maybe then it should make you consider what are you posting? And I always have this when I put out a post, who might see it? And for trainees, it might be a future training director, a future boss. For me, I have the mindset, any tweet I put out, I think, am I comfortable with my CEO seeing this post? And if I'm not, then I should not post it. So in my 3+ years with Twitter, this has had, as you can see, a huge impact on recruitment. I've had great collaboration on manuscripts related to this, a number of talks on this, blogs, podcasts, opinion pieces. And in that short effort, without even this being my goal, you could see my Twitter following from the 50 followers I had after that celiac chat to really exploding in recent years. So in summary, it's never too late to begin in social media use. Go into it with a focus for branding, though, otherwise you're going to get lost very quickly. I think you can use it as a source of unofficial CME, even if you're not in it to tweet. I would say avoid controversy, be very mindful of Hipaa issues, don't engage with the trolls, and I would say you should control your social media use. Don't let it control you.
Great. Well, that was a wonderful overview. I know there's a number of questions. I'm going to start off with the first quick question. So do you have... Do you tweet out under a chair of medicine account as well as a personal account? How do you manage work type hashtags on your own?
Yeah, that's a great question. So even when I was the residency director, again, I had my own social media profile. That allowed me to tweet things that were more personal to me, but also aligned with my vision and mission. We also had a residency social media account that, again, myself and the chief residents only had administrative access to. So our own trainees couldn't post on that. For the Department of Medicine right now, we're just now developing a Department of Medicine social media profile. Again, we're putting great thought into who we want to have access to that. It'll include myself. I have a new chair for equity, inclusion, and diversity who will have administrative access. And we're being very thoughtful on the few additional people that we may allow administrative access, because again, when you open up and let more people post on that, you just can't pull that back. So I will continue to post from my own, but I will use my account to disseminate things on, let's say a departmental website and vice versa. But everything I put on my own may not be appropriate for the departmental posting site as well.
Great. Okay, the first question will be from Dr. Trowbridge.
Oh, great. Okay, hi. So, Amy, this was fantastic. And interestingly, academic chiefs and leaders of GIM, we've just had a throwdown about social media before and against. And I'm interested in what are the workshops, trainings, and coaches you would recommend in addition to papers like yours for beginners, so we really do this correctly. And how many hours in general, when you were starting, did it take you to develop that thoughtful recruitment Twitter program?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think in terms of training, probably much of my training was just spending a few sit-down sessions with colleagues of mine who I could see were very active in this space. If you go to a lot of our, virtual national meetings now, a lot of them will have social media 101. Are you getting a lot of ear interference? I'm not sure if that's on my end or on your end. There's a lot of kind of social media 101 at a lot of meetings, whether it's APTM or, SGIM or any of these sort of hospital sites. Can you hear me okay? Okay. A lot of these sites have these sorts of social media one-on-one, sit downs for 40 minutes, an hour, part of a workshop. those are really, really helpful. They'll go through some of the tips that I talked about, but maybe on a little slower pace. I think there's also now social media kind of webinars that you can go to. There's, in fact, one institution, Duke, has a nephrology, internship for social media where you can spend really a, part of your training program learning social media as a, really a cool tip and tool. In terms of time, again, initially, this took a little bit of time of sitting down with the chief residents to talk about our strategy. But I tell you, I think your first few tweets, they take forever because you overthink and you make them perfect and things like that. And you'll find that for me, people think I spend a lot of time on social media. I honestly don't. My time on social media is when I'm, after dinner, sitting down at the TV, having time to rest and relax, I'll pull up most social media and I might do it for a half hour at that point. Again, following the key leaders and seeing what's been going out there. Again, I'll plan ahead, like, okay, now it's, Black History Month. What sort of post do I want to put out or think about for next month in terms of Black History Month? So I'll be strategic in thinking ahead. But again, this is where I think it's helpful to know that you can really set parameters. And even when I was a training director, my time tweeting it all might be on the shuttle bus going from our campuses. I might just see what's going on social media then, but I might have 2 weeks where I completely walk away from social media because I'm so busy with deadlines and other things. But it's okay, you just jump back into where you started. It's not something like email or your in basket that if you ignore, you're going to feel like you have to catch up. I've never felt that sense. And so maybe you just need to give yourself permission to not have to see every tweet, and that's absolutely okay.
Okay, next question from Kara Westmus. Kara?
Yes, fantastic. Thank you so much for your presentation. I was interested in what you did with the journal clubs and how you had all the articles listed in a tweet with links, and just curious about the copyright on that and how people can directly access those links through social media.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. So for that specific journal club that we did through Physician Weekly Chat, what we did is, 8 articles was a lot to get through in 1 hour. But what we did is, again, we provided the articles we'd be talking about 3 weeks in advance so people could look them up. All of them were articles that had open access online so that, anyone could get them, so that we were okay with that copyright piece. And then what we did for the journal club is we just asked one provocative sort of question about each article. That's how it allowed us to get through 8 articles within an hour. So, we had assumed that people had read that article in advance. We asked a single question for people to comment on, and then we moved to the next article. 8 was a lot. Again, we included that many just for the sake of this kind of study and paper, but you could just have a single article. I think for most journal articles, you might, or a chat, you might have 1 or 2 articles and just have some provocative questions that you can ask about that. But I think in terms of adding the link, many articles now have the PDF online link available. So just checking to make sure that that's the case.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Next question, Lauren Benedek.
Thank you so much for your wonderful talk. I have to say the other chief residents and I, in charge of our residency Twitter account, use your Mayo residency Twitter account as inspiration. So thank you for that. My question pertains to the role of social media in medical education. In addition to recruitment and branding, what do you think the role is of Twitter in medical education, and can it be used as an effective tool for teaching?
Yeah, great question, Lauren. I think absolutely it can. Again, as I showed from some of those sorts of pieces from whether it's, core IM or things we do for no reason. Again, those are great teaching pearls that you can use on rounds. I've also seen individuals or chief residents, put out cool tweetorials about like, here's my quick primer on hyponatremia. And then we'll give a quick tweetorial, which is kind of a tweet within a tweet, kind of summarizing some key take-home points. Again, I have learned so much outside of my specialty of GI in the last year, just great refreshers of hyponatremia or heart failure management through some of those pearls. So I think it is really effective way to learn and to educate. Again, that's assuming that you're following sources that you think are reliable so that your trainees are learning from reliable sources and not someone who might be tweeting something out that may not be accurate. So I think that's where following reliable sources and knowing who are the disseminators of great med ed sort of things is really useful.
Thank you.
Next question from Amanda Fruin.
I don't know what's gonna be. I thought.
So I'll ask Amanda's questions while she's figuring out. So I think this is a great question. If you don't have a social media account, do you think that is harmful? Do you think it is necessary these days to be successful?
I don't think it's harmful. What I would say is it's absolutely, I see it as really useful. I mean, you can go through your whole career without having it and absolutely fine. But what I have seen is some junior faculty who have kind of jumped on social media for their branding. And I can just see how it's catapulted their career, I think, more quickly than without social media. And why I say that is if they're showing their branding, let's say in a disease that they're interested in, they published a few times, that work gets disseminated. You can imagine when it comes to picking the speakers at a scientific meeting, people might think, oh, you know, there's this up and coming person who I've seen tweeting and publishing in this space. That would be someone that we should think about inviting, you know, to give a talk. So I have seen it being very effective in that regard. And that's why I think it would be helpful in terms of augmenting someone's career, because it really allows you to get your name and branding out. How else do you do that other than traditionally, you know, the talks and papers that we do? But if someone is not seeing that information because they're relying on print journal or going to that meeting to seeing what you're doing, again, it really has more of a finite focus. Whereas again, through social media, you put that out there and suddenly it's not only the people that are following you, but then their followers see it. And it's like this spider web where it suddenly just blossoms into so many people learning that information.
Great. I think one more question from Joe Bluestein.
Oh, there. Okay. So yeah, I was asking, is there a way to block, like, actually, I took retweets from an account, like from your residency account, because I know, you know, if by accident or something, that's kind of getting sent around. The other question I had, do you find any of your trainees or faculty spending too much time on social media that it's kind of impacting their performance?
Yeah, so the first one, if I understood it right, is can you block things that come out of an account? I think you can always, you know, do some blocks. You know, if there's something that would ever come out on an account that I'd be partly responsible for, first of all, I'd take down the tweet. You know, I have blocked people. I have blocked trolls on any sorts of things if I've needed to. But, you know, I always go into it the lenses. I hope I never have to use blocks because I've used appropriate insight and awareness before I even posted a tweet from that standpoint. I think in terms of too much use of social media, I guess I just assume faculty are, you know, hopefully, you know, understand what their limitations are and their expectations of their role. I worry probably less about that. I definitely have seen trainees who have been on social media a lot. And again, within my own program. And again, when that was the case, I just made sure, is that trainee successful in their academic and clinical, you know, expectations? And if they are falling short on that, I've had to have conversations with trainees of, you know what, I need to not see you on social media during work hours because you're behind on getting your notes signed, you're behind on these administrative tasks. So I have had to have those conversations with trainees. And, you know, I know about that because, you know, they might follow me so I can, and, you know, so I might see what they're doing on social media. So I have had to have a few conversations with a few trainees over the years regarding that. But again, I think most are pretty good at learning how to manage their time. And that's really an important thing. Like I said, you can't let social media manage you. Otherwise, it will come at the impact of whatever your clinical and other administrative expectations are. And you never want that to happen.
Well, thank you again. I just want to remind everybody the grand rounds will be posted on our website. So if you need to look back at some of the references and URLs that will be available. I want to thank Amy so much, Dr. Oxentenko is what I should say, for really a wonderful tutorial on the power of social media. And I also particularly like the use of the distribution of your influence as part of promotion packets, and how do we incorporate how people are impacting and disseminating their information throughout social media. So thank you again. Thank you to our residents for picking such an outstanding and timely discussion. So I hope everybody stays warm. And we look forward to next week's.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you all. Thank you again for inviting me.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.